Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 440, Cutting the Ties That Bind. The episode begins with Ash and the gang finally having a ride on Metallica Island. And they were at the Pokemon Center there, specifically in the Pokemon Center's backyard. Behind the Pokemon Center, Ash decided to send out every single one of his Pokemon, Pikachu, Donphan, Sceptile, Swallow, and Corphish, so that he could train them all for his upcoming battle at the Battle Palace. May, on the other hand, after she had watched Ash rally all his Pokemon together, sent out her Eevee so she could train with it to increase its likelihood of winning its first ever contest, because she planned to have Eevee partake in her next contest. Anyways, she had Eevee train by using a Shadow Ball, showing off its new move that it had just learned after some training. Yay! Ash was now focusing on hyping up all of his Pokemon, making them cheer in excitement for the battle. We then see Brock and Max, who were watching May and Ash train while Brock was bottle feeding Bonsai the milk that he liked. Max was most interested in May's Eevee, commenting that he couldn't wait to see it used in the contest, while both Max and Brock talked about how hyped up Ash and May were getting for the next challenges. Next, Ash had his Pokemon practice their attacks. He had his Donphan use Rollout to smash through a boulder, he had Corphish use Bubble Beam to destroy the pieces of the boulder into smaller pieces, and then Ash just has his Swallow practice its quick attack. He then had Sceptile try Bullet Seed, but Bullet Seed failed, making Sceptile both surprised and angry at itself for still not being able to attack, as it gritted its teeth in anger. Max thought that Sceptile was just exhausted, while Brock suggested that Sceptile's heart was still broken, and maybe Sceptile would be able to attack again, like Nurse Joy said, once its heart healed. Sceptile wouldn't take not attacking for an answer, and desperately tried to continue firing Bullet Seeds, but it failed every time, eventually falling to its knees in despair. Ash's other Pokemon went up to Sceptile, trying to comfort it, basically saying that, it would get back its ability to attack eventually, but these attempts to comfort Sceptile failed. It was too bitchy, so Ash and Pikachu took action, going up to Sceptile, with Ash suggesting that Sceptile should just maybe have some more rest at a Pokemon Center. Maybe that would help. But Sceptile refused to take Ash and Pikachu's advice and suddenly got up and ran off into the woods, scared and mad at itself for not being able to attack. Ash and Pikachu, not wanting Sceptile to get into trouble by itself, immediately run after it. May, who was holding Eevee, Brock, who was holding Bonsai, and Max were all very worried about Sceptile, as were all the other Pokemon, and they wanted to go after Ash and Sceptile, but Brock eventually advised against this, since it was getting dark. Also, Brock commented that the best thing for Sceptile may be for it to have some time alone with Ash to re-establish their bond that was kind of waning, since Sceptile was so bitchy. Anyways, back in the woods, Sceptile continued to run, closing its eyes, not wanting to look at anything, until it finally reached a tree and started to bash its head against it. After several hits, it backed up in pain and dropped to its hands and knees in despair. It knew that the bashing was painful, but it basically just wanted to torture itself because it felt super bad for not being able to attack. Just then, though, Ash and Pikachu catch up to Sceptile, and he tries again to encourage Sceptile to just stop taking its ability to no longer attack so hard and just relax, stating that Sceptile would regain its ability to attack eventually. Sceptile didn't have any chance to even fully observe what Ash was saying, because both he and Ash and Pikachu all heard something approaching, which was immediately revealed to be a swarm of Beedrill, who dived down to attack, likely being disturbed by Sceptile making a lot of noise, bashing its head against a tree. Ash, not wanting to get stung, desperately commanded Pikachu to use a Thunderbolt, as he was surprised to see the sheer amount of Beedrill encircling him, Sceptile, and Pikachu. The Thunderbolt was technically successful, as it shocked every single one of the Beedrill and scared off a group of them, but another group appeared, taking the first group's place, which interrupted Ash and Pikachu trying to talk to Sceptile again. Ash was originally going to have Pikachu just use Thunderbolt on all of these Beedrill like it did for the first one, but with the amount of Beedrill this time, and Ash noticed that there was even more than before, so he told Pikachu not to worry about it, and he decided to simply run with Pikachu instead, and told Sceptile to come with them, and Sceptile actually listened, as the three of them ran away with the Beedrill still in pursuit. Unfortunately, Ash, Pikachu, and Sceptile couldn't run for long, because they eventually found themselves cornered on the edge of a cliff. There was a raging river in front of them, if they were to drop down from the cliff, and an angry swarm of Beedrill approaching behind them. When the Beedrill got super close, Sceptile stepped in front of Ash and Pikachu to protect them, and the Beedrill started to mercilessly attack Sceptile, causing it to grit its teeth and cringe as it took a barrage of attacks, such as poison stings and pin needles, and all that shit. Obviously, Ash didn't want Sceptile to get injured, so he held up Sceptile's Pokeball, and then tried to recall it, but before Ash could recall Sceptile, the Beedrill attacked Sceptile so hard that Sceptile was knocked back into Ash, causing Ash to drop Sceptile's Pokeball. So it stays on land, while the knocked back Ash, Pikachu, and Sceptile go tumbling down off the edge of the cliff into the river. After almost drowning in water, Ash quickly manages to grab a hold of a rock in the middle of the water to keep himself afloat, and he calls out for Pikachu and Sceptile. Sceptile eventually washed near him, and Ash grabbed Sceptile's arm before it went past to save it, but Ash got worried because he didn't know where Pikachu was. Just then, the river also carries Pikachu past, but even though Ash and Sceptile both tried, they couldn't catch Pikachu in time before the river carried Pikachu off along the current as Ash cried out for it. Ash was very worried for Pikachu and what would happen to it if it continued to go along the river, but he tried his best to calm down and swore that he would find Pikachu as soon as he could. Meanwhile, Team Rocket, they had been spying on Ash, Sceptile, and Pikachu when they were running through the forest and saw what had happened with the Beedrill, so they got scared, worrying that the Beedrill may come and attack them. So they prepared a box. When they heard the Beedrill approaching, they very quickly hid underneath the box and tried to use it as a shield. And they thought that this box would be more than safe, as they bragged about how secure their box was from the Beedrill. But just then, the Beedrill proved that the box wasn't a good way to protect them, since the Beedrill easily managed to puncture the box and tear it apart with their pincers. So Team Rocket ran away in fear, but the Beedrill swarm still pursued them. Team Rocket were annoyed by this, but they were even more annoyed when Wobbuffet forcibly popped its Pokeball. We then cut back to the Pokemon Center, where Brock, May, and Max, when Brock was still holding Bonsly, and they were still holding Eevee, were worried, since Ash, Pikachu, and Sceptile still hadn't returned after a long time, and it was going to get dark soon. And debated that maybe they actually should go in and look for them. Just then, May, Max, and Brock hear a voice behind them, and they turn around, knowing that the voice didn't belong to Ash. It belonged to Scott, who quickly greeted Brock and Max, and they greeted him back, although Ash wondered where the fuck Ash and Pikachu were. So, May nervously explained what happened, which was that Ash and Pikachu had ran into the woods to go after the runaway Sceptile, and this alarmed Scott, explaining that Ash, Pikachu, and Sceptile would get in a lot of trouble if they went into the forest in the area this time of year, since this was the time of year on Metallica Island, where the Kakuna evolved into deadly Beedrill. And the Beedrill were especially dangerous because they gathered in swarms that were extremely territorial and would attack anyone who was in their home. So Scott essentially stated that Ash, Pikachu, and Sceptile could get attacked. Although unbeknownst to Scott and the gang, Ash, Sceptile, and Pikachu had already been attacked, of course. Anyways, Max, Brock, and May panicked, realizing the danger that Ash, Sceptile, and Pikachu were in, and declared that they had to go look for them. Scott agreed, and quickly just grabbed some stuff from his little supply drawer in his Jeep to help in their search. He didn't want to take his Jeep into the forest, in case that happened to alert some Beedrill to begin with. Meanwhile, back with Ash and Sceptile, still having lost Pikachu, they managed to make their way out of the water and were now walking along a path in the forest, with Ash essentially carrying Sceptile, since it was super weak. Ash declared that they had to get back to the Pokémon Center to get Sceptile some help. Just then, though, this was confirmed as Sceptile fell to the ground in pure pain on its knees. Ash realized that Sceptile was hurt worse than he thought, and suggested that instead of walking along, they should just rest now. Sceptile tried to refuse this, not wanting to be viewed as weak and having to take a break. And he also didn't want to leave Pikachu separated longer than it had to be, but Ash assured Sceptile that Pikachu would be okay, and advised that they get some rest so they could continue stronger later. Basically, it'd be better if they took a break and had some rest than just continued on continuously at a slower pace. Sceptile was still hesitant, but eventually agreed. We then cut back to Scott, May, Max, and Brock, with Brock still holding Bonsly, as Scott led May, Max, and Brock through the woods in search of Ash, Pikachu, and Sceptile. While they were walking, Scott pulls out what he had grabbed before they set off, which was a repel, and revealed that the repel could actually keep the Beedrill away. Well, at least if they walked. He still feared that if he used his Jeep, it would alert the Beedrill, even with the repel, but he proceeded to spray it, so hopefully the Beedrill would stay away from them. Right as May, Max, and Brock thanked Scott for bringing the repel, Bonsly spotted something up ahead. So Brock asked Bonsly what it was, but since Bonsly couldn't respond, they simply continued to walk ahead, and eventually they found what Bonsly saw, a Pokeball. Seeing as no other trainers were out in the forest, everyone immediately came to the conclusion that the Pokeball must have been Ash's, and was probably Sceptile's, since all the other Pokemon, aside from Pikachu, who didn't even go in his Pokeball, were still at the Pokemon Center. Scott quickly picks up Sceptile's Pokeball, and he and the gang continue on, and eventually see the edge of the cliff, and they look down and see the raging river below, and immediately worry that Ash, Pikachu, and Sceptile must have fallen into the river, and could have died. Scott gave May, Max, and Brock hope that Ash, Sceptile, and Pikachu may not have died though, and suggested that they follow the river to find out, and May, Max, and Brock agreed, and the four of them hurried off, following the trail of the river, doing so by finding a different path that had the river running alongside it. Meanwhile, back with Ash and Sceptile, they were now resting in a little cave alcove thing by a tree. And full-on nighttime quickly arrived, so Ash put together a meal for himself and Sceptile using some berries that he gathered in the area. Sceptile quickly scarfed down some berries, and because of this, it actually started to feel better from some of its injuries, although Ash still proposed that they should probably get to bed to get even more rest, and suggested that they could find Pikachu in the morning. Sceptile obliged, lying down, preparing to go to sleep, although Ash apologized to Sceptile for how uncomfortable the sleep would be, since it would usually be sleeping in its Pokeball, as opposed to sleeping on a hard ground floor. But since Ash didn't have his Pokeball with him, sleeping on the ground floor was the best Sceptile could do. Ash then lay down beside Sceptile and looked up at the moon, thinking about Pikachu, hoping that Pikachu would be okay on his own, literally praying. Speaking of Pikachu, we then see him somewhere downriver, now very weak as he struggles, just barely managing to get to the shore, and collapses, lacking even the strength to remain standing. A collapsed Pikachu then heard heavy footsteps though, and these footsteps turned out to be coming from a large Venusaur with an old man riding on it. Meanwhile, back with Scott, May, Max, and Brock, they were still wandering, following the river in search of Ash, Pikachu, and Sceptile, when they suddenly saw smoke in the distance. And they presumed that maybe the fire was coming from a campfire, and perhaps Ash was camping out. So they head off in the direction of the smoke. We then see that what the source of the smoke was indeed a campfire, where the old man was sitting next to his Venusaur, mixing something in a bowl. He finished mixing, and told Pikachu, who he had laying on a little patch of grass, to drink it. It did, but it didn't seem to like the taste very much. But I assumed that the old man was probably healing Pikachu up. Right as Pikachu finished drinking, May, Max, Brock, and Scott arrived. Scott immediately greeted the old man, implying that he knew him. May, Max, and Brock didn't focus on the old man, though. They focused on Pikachu, who they were very glad to see, and Pikachu was very glad to see them as well, as it was recovering, presumably with the help of the old man's drink. The old man then greeted Scott back, as May, Max, and Brock asked if Pikachu was okay, and Pikachu responded with a little weak cry, implying that it was still healing, but it was doing good for the most part, and the old man confirmed this, saying that it was still healing, but it was to be fine soon. The old man then asked Scott who the fuck was with him, leading Scott to introduce May, Brock, and Max to the old man, and introduce the old man to them as one of the Frontier Brains, known as Palace Maven Spencer. Yes, he was the Frontier Brain of the Battle Palace, who Ash would soon face. Spencer confirmed this, and stood up with the help of his red and black cane-like thing, saying that it was good to meet May, Max, and Brock. May, Max, Brock, and even Bonsai were surprised to learn Spencer's identity. They didn't expect a super old guy to be a Frontier Brain, and they explained that the Pikachu Spencer had saved belonged to their friend Ash, who was missing, and actually wanted to take on Spencer, but they asked if Spencer had seen Ash, and Spencer denies this. So May, Max, and Brock decided that they were going to keep searching for Ash. But just before they went, May and Max's stomachs both growl, much to their embarrassment, as they apologized for being hungry. However, they then realized they had no reason to apologize, since it was super late, and it had been a while since they had eaten. Venusaur, hearing this, extends one of its vines, and picks up some nearby fruit, offering it to them. May and Max gladly take it, as Spencer suggests that it would probably be best that they recharge and eat some stuff anyways, since the Beedrill would likely go to sleep soon, so they would no longer be a threat while they searched. So, with that, everyone chowed down on some fruit, including Spencer's Venusaur. Meanwhile, back with Ash and Sceptile, Sceptile hadn't actually been able to fall asleep. Ash fell asleep before Sceptile did, and started to talk in his sleep. Sceptile overheard Ash talking in his sleep, which was Ash basically telling Sceptile to be okay, and telling Pikachu to be okay too. Sceptile, hearing this, was pleased that Ash really did care about him and the rest of his Pokemon. So, knowing this, along with the fact that he had successfully rescued Ash today, despite not being able to use any attacks, gave him the peace of mind to be able to finally fall asleep. After looking at Ash for a little while. Meanwhile, back at the campsite around the fire, which smoke was bellowing out of, while they were eating, Brock, May, and Max explained to Spencer, as well as Scott, since he didn't really know, what has been happening with Ash and Sceptile. And specifically, about how since Sceptile evolved, Sceptile hadn't been able to use any attacks. Team Rocket overhears this from some nearby bushes, and they conclude that since Sceptile couldn't use any attacks, it was the perfect time for them to steal both Pikachu and Sceptile, while they were still missing, especially since May, Max, Brock, Spencer, and Scott wouldn't be able to help them if they were still missing. So, with that, Team Rocket cheered, as Wobbuffet popped out of his Pokeball, and they quickly silenced him when they were excited to capture Pikachu and Sceptile. Anyways, May, Max, Brock, and Scott were all finished their food, and they thanked Spencer, admitting that the food, which was the fruit he had collected throughout his time in the forest, was very good. Spencer then noticed that Pikachu had gone to sleep to fully heal up, and decided to exposition dump a little bit about himself and the healing medicines that he makes. He said that all his medicines were made purely out of stuff from nature, and he lived according to nature, which to him was the way everyone's life should be. It should be entirely based on nature. Just then, Pikachu woke up, and was extremely healed up and raring to go, which made Scott, Brock, May, and Max very happy, obviously. They were obviously happy to see Pikachu back up on its feet and raring to go, and they were also happy to see that Spencer's medicines really did work, even if they were just made through purely natural ways. Spencer then stood up and suggested that since everyone's eaten and rested now, they should resume searching for Ash, right as morning arrived. And Pikachu stood up, very excited to go find Ash as well. So, Spencer, Scott, May, Max, Brock, and Pikachu officially resumed their search, and we then cut back to Ash and Sceptile, who were up and at it at the crack of dawn, starting to walk again, searching for Pikachu, as Ash called out for him while carrying Sceptile, since Sceptile still had quite a bit of injuries. Ash was so distracted calling out for Sceptile, though, that he ended up tripping over a rock and fell flat on the ground, with Sceptile falling flat too, since Ash was carrying him, and Ash just ended up literally getting flattened out on the ground because of Sceptile's added weight, since Sceptile fell on him. Sceptile felt bad, and feared that he hurt Ash because of his weight, but Ash assured Sceptile that he was okay. However, when he tried to get up, he found out that he had scraped his knee, and he examined the injury for a bit, but regardless he ended up getting up and continued to walk and carry Sceptile at the same time, determined to get to the Pokemon Center to get not just Sceptile healed, but also his knee, so that he could find Pikachu in perfect shape. Basically, Ash had decided that he and Sceptile were going to make it back to the Pokemon Center first, before focusing their full efforts on finding Pikachu, having faith that Pikachu would be okay. Although, if he found Pikachu along the way to the Pokemon Center, that wouldn't be bad either. Sceptile really respected Ash, as he continued to persevere and carries him. Eventually, as Ash continued to carry Sceptile, the two of them came across a group of Kakuna, hanging around in the trees. However, no Beedrill were present. Ash suggested that Kakuna usually weren't Kakuna for long. They usually went from Weedle to Kakuna and almost immediately after Beedrill. So Ash suggested that he and Sceptile be very quiet as they went through this area past the Kakuna, so that the Kakuna wouldn't wake up and evolve and start attacking. So Ash and Sceptile proceeded forward as quiet as they could, but right as they made it out of the area, a swarm of Beedrill caught up to them. It was unclear if this was the swarm of Beedrill from before, or if it was the Kakuna who were now freshly evolved, but regardless, Ash and Sceptile ran as fast as they could to get away from the Beedrill. As they ran, they eventually saw sunlight up ahead, which made them think that maybe they were finally getting out of the forest, since trees wouldn't block a lot of the sun anymore. But when they came out of the forest, they only arrived at a dead end. So they had increased their speed for nothing, because when they turned around from the dead end, the Beedrill had caught up to them. Ash managed to find a stick and grabbed it, prepared to fight the Beedrill himself to protect him and Sceptile if he had to, even if he deep down knew it would be a losing battle. Sure enough, one of the Beedrills charges at Ash with its pincer, and Ash deflects the pincer with his stick, and declares that he wouldn't let anything happen to Sceptile. But then one of the Beedrill hits Ash hard with its pincer, breaking his stick and sending Ash flying back, allowing the entire swarm to close in on Ash. But Sceptile then jumps in front of Ash to protect him, wanting to repay the favor to Ash, as it jumped up and tried to use Bullet Seed on all the Beedrill, but once again, the Bullet Seed failed, since only dust came out of Sceptile's mouth. The Beedrill then closed in on Sceptile, leaving Ash to call out to it, warning it to get the fuck out of the way. But thankfully, right before the Beedrill attacked the defenseless Sceptile, Pikachu showed up, closely followed by May, Max, and Brock, and Pikachu used a Thunderbolt, which was enough to briefly weaken the Beedrill. Ash was very hyped to see his friends, and especially Pikachu, for that matter, but just then, this happy moment was interrupted, right as Brock, May, Max, and Pikachu ran up to Ash and Sceptile, as the Beedrill quickly started to attack again. Having recovered from Pikachu's Thunderbolt, Pikachu was prepared to simply just zap them again, but right before Pikachu could get involved, some sort of powder of some sort calmed the Beedrill down. Obviously, Ash and the gang were confused with what the fuck was going on, but then they saw Venusaur, Spencer, and Scott arrive, and the powder happened to be Venusaur using Sweet Scent. Ash greets Scott, happy to see him too, although he doesn't greet Spencer and Venusaur, because he didn't know who the fuck they even were. Brock, however, knowing who Spencer was, thanked him and his Venusaur, as Spencer then turned his attention to the calmed down Beedrill swarm and asked them to leave, and since they were calmed down, they did, flying away. Ash was impressed with Spencer's ability to calm down the Beedrill, and also impressed with the fact that he was literally just sitting on his Venusaur. And then Brock and May finally told Ash who Spencer was, the Battle Frontier brain of the Battle Palace. Ash thanked Spencer for his help, but just then, 2 claws grabbed Pikachu and Sceptile. These claws, of course, coming from Team Rocket's Meowth Balloon, who had arrived. Team Rocket then laughed in their Meowth Balloon as they brag about how fucking easy it was for them to steal both Pikachu and Sceptile, although Spencer demands to know who Team Rocket was because he had never seen them before. This was a mistake though, because Team Rocket then go into their annoying motto, while Meowth still manned the controls of the 2 claws, so that Meowth could bring Pikachu and Sceptile up to the Meowth Balloon. After the motto was done, with Mime Jr. also participating in the motto, Ash has Pikachu use Thunderbolt to try and break free from the claws. But Team Rocket just laughs, explaining that Pikachu's attacks wouldn't work because the claws were electric-proof, and they laugh even harder when they taunt Ash, saying that since Sceptile couldn't attack to begin with, there was nothing Ash could do, and Team Rocket then wave goodbye tauntingly as they start to leave in the Meowth Balloon, as Ash gives chase, and not wanting to save Pikachu and Sceptile before Team Rocket got away. Unfortunately, Team Rocket was getting away, and Ash wasn't fast enough to catch up, nor was he high enough to actually get to the balloon. However, he then spotted a dead tree, which had now been reduced to just a single log, and since it was arched up, he climbed it and prepared to jump, struggling to do so as he cringed from the pain of his injured knee. But even as he was putting pressure on it while he jumped anyways, and managed to grab a hold of the arm that was holding Sceptile, much to Team Rocket's surprise. And May, Max, Brock, Scott, and Spencer's, for that matter, since now Ash was trying his best to climb up Sceptile's claw to get to Pikachu's so he could free them both. Meowth, not wanting this to happen, angrily worked the remote control that controlled the claws, trying to shake Ash off, but Ash continued to hang on as best as he could, which made Jessie angry, and she sent out Dustox to try and stop him by attacking him with Poison Sting. Ash did get pierced by these stings and yelled in pain, but he still hung on and declared he would not let Team Rocket get away with his Pokemon or trying to hurt him or them. Sceptile and Scott and Spencer and Max and May and Brock were very scared for Ash, thinking he was going to fall off any second, and got especially worried since the balloon was getting extremely high, so if Ash fell, he would likely die. But regardless, Ash hung on and promised to save Pikachu and Sceptile, which made Sceptile extremely nervous, wishing that they could help Ash and that Ash wouldn't sacrifice himself to save him and Pikachu. Jessie was extremely bitchy, along with the rest of Team Rocket, and Ash continued to hang on, so she ordered Dustox to knock Ash off of the claw with a tackle attack, and Dustox did this, causing Ash to fall to the ground, and Pikachu, Sceptile, Brock, May, Max, Scott, and Spencer all to cry out in fear. As Sceptile was crying out though, the blade on its right arm grows and energizes, and as it continues to scream, it successfully uses Leaf Blade to free itself and Pikachu from the claws. Much to everyone's, including Ash who was still falling's, shock, Pikachu then immediately jumps onto Sceptile's back, and Sceptile uses Quick Attack to fall towards Ash, and immediately after this, Sceptile catches Ash and immediately fires a Bullet Seed to soften their landing, and Sceptile then sets Ash down, and Pikachu gets off, and Ash congratulates Sceptile on its success. It used attacks again to save itself, Ash, and Pikachu. Yay! Brock, May, Max, Pikachu, Scott, and Spencer congratulate Sceptile as well, but just then, Sceptile falls to the ground, overcome by its injuries, so even though it had been able to use attacks, it was still super weak from its previous wounds to do any more attacks. However, Spencer stepped in and sent out his Chansey, and he had to use Heal Bell, which healed Sceptile. Now that Sceptile was healed, it rushed into a bush and picked out a new twig, since it had lost its previous one during its injuries. Ash and his friends were all excited to see that Sceptile was finally okay, even Spencer and Scott. Just then though, Team Rocket, who were angry that Sceptile and Pikachu had escaped, stated that they would refuse to give up on capturing the two of them, and landed their Meowth Balloon, preparing for battle. against Sceptile and Pikachu back, as Jessie still had her Dustox out, and James sent out his Cacnea. Before the battle could begin, though, Spencer interrupted and warns that Team Rocket shouldn't mess with Sceptile, since it was recovered now, and in its natural territory, the forest, being a grass type. And joked that Team Rocket just should leave Sceptile alone, since they clearly cared about it and didn't want to capture it, since it was because of their interference that Sceptile regained its confidence. Team Rocket were enraged at the idea that they actually helped Sceptile, and immediately Jessie cut Spencer off, like how Spencer had cut them off, and she called for a tackle from Dustox, and James called for a knee arm from Cacnea, although Ash told Sceptile to counter with a Leaf Blade, which stopped both of Dustox and Cacnea's attacks and sent them flying right by Jessie and James, much to their surprise. Ash then told Sceptile to use a Bullet Seed, which sent Team Rocket blasting off and destroyed their Meowth balloon. With Team Rocket gone, Ash and gang, Scott and Spencer returned to the Metallica Island Pokemon Center, and Ash thanks Spencer for all of his help, leading Spencer to say that he was just fond of rescuing people, since it was the natural way to do things. Like, it was the natural human way, natural human nature to save people, and Spencer was all about following natural human nature. Scott then reminds Ash about the Battle Palace, and Spencer being the frontier brain there, and Scott tells Spencer that Ash wanted to challenge him to a battle, although Spencer first tells Ash that he should take a bit of time to rest for the day after everything that had happened with Sceptile, and then first thing tomorrow they could have their battle. Ash officially agreed to this, and confirmed that their battle would take place tomorrow, which Spencer also agreed to. So, with that, it was officially decided. Ash versus Spencer would take place next episode, and Ash was confident that he could win his next Battle Frontier symbol, which Spencer explained was the Spirit symbol, because Sceptile had the ability to use its moves again, and had increased its confidence levels even more so than it originally had. So if Ash used Sceptile in the battle, then he could for sure win. Sceptile then gave Ash a look, indicating that it really wanted to battle.